Hey there everybody, it's DiLisio, and today I'm going to be doing one of a series of videos where I'm covering all of the characters in Merchant's Cove. This includes the base game characters and the 3 expansion characters as well. I'm also going to talk a bit about the Secret Stash expansion. What I'm planning to do is give you a brief overview of how these characters play. Then afterwards I'll talk to you about what their level of complexity is ranked among all of the characters within the game, the main mechanisms that run those characters, and all of this is going to culminate in a video where I'm going to rank all of the Merchant's Cove characters in the order of my preference. So, without further ado, let's take a look at today's character. Okay, let's take a look at the Blacksmith. Here we see the components for the Blacksmith. We've got our main player board, which comes, I've got it set up kind of how you're supposed to, how you've got these 4 coal dice, the black dice in the indicated numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are for the 4 different furnaces here. We've got our smelting furnace down here, which has 4 alloy dice. It doesn't matter right now, it's just one of each color. The numbers don't mean anything at the particular point. We've got our staff board right here. We've got our small goods here, which represent armor, our large goods here, which represent weapons, our sail shelf, and 4 alloy dice here that you would roll at the beginning of your turn. All right, so, also, we've got our Blacksmith. I should point this out. This is a painted version of the Blacksmith character. This does not come pre-painted. I had Wendy Yee, Chris Yee's wife, paint this figure, and she did a lovely job, so I figured I'd show that off. It starts on the activate staff, just like always, and you have those standard 2 actions of activate staff and gaining a new townsfolk. All right, so let's talk about the actions that are specific to the Blacksmith. This is essentially a dice placement mechanism that is kind of at the center of this. And so one of the things you can do is you can load up any of these 4 furnaces. It's all going to cost you 1 time to do so. So by doing this, you're going to be adding dice from your supply into these furnaces. And if you're going to be doing large furnaces, you're going to be putting in 2 dice at a time. If you're doing small furnaces, you're loading in 1 die at a time. So what you're doing is you're going to be looking at the numbers along the top here. So, for example, if I were to choose to load this one, I would add 1 to whatever 2 dice I put there, add all the pips up, and that's going to determine whether I could get a get a good, and if so, if I get corruption or not. So for the green and red here, it's saying that you need a value of 10 plus around all 3 of the dice to gain a good, or 8 or 9 will get you the good, but you're going to have to take a corruption. For the yellow and blue, it's 12 plus for a non-corruption, 10 and 11 for corruption. So let's say, for example, I went ahead and I loaded this furnace. I could take any one of these that I want. So let's say that I want to get a yellow good. It's whatever die is in the topmost spot that's going to determine which good you get. So if I put this yellow die here, that means that I'm trying to craft a yellow armor, all right? And my value right now is at 7. So loading up those furnaces is going to work the same way, essentially, where you are placing either 1 die or 2 at the same time for the purposes of getting dice in those spots. The other thing that you can do is you can load the smelting furnace, which this is this action right here. It costs 1 time. And what you're going to do is you're going to place any one of these dice into that furnace. At this point, the color and the number, it doesn't matter. This is going to be your first step towards getting a new one of these dice into your supply, and also sponsorship within the sponsorship, a faction hall. So let's say I put this blue die right there. All right, so I'm getting myself geared up. The next thing that you can do is forging, and this is going to be kind of the main heart of how this runs. Takes you 2 time, you go right there. When you forge, you look at the loaded furnaces and you add up the total pip value on all the dice, including the coal die, and that tells you what the heat level is. You can compare it. So now I can see here that I have 7, all right? A value of 7. I compare that to what it shows here, and it says with a 7 or 8, you do successfully get a good, in this case a small yellow good, a yellow armor, but you are going to take a corruption, all right? I would have needed to have a 6 or lower. So here you want smaller numbers. I actually would have been smarter off putting a smaller die there, but just to show you, that would get me a corruption, okay? High numbers here, low numbers here. So you've got that. You set aside any of the dice that you use to produce a good, so I set that aside. I got the good, and I took a corruption card. All right. Next, and you can also produce goods at multiple loaded furnaces with a single forge action. So if I had other dice, I could have done more than one at a time. The other thing you can do is if you've got a new alloy die at the loaded smelting furnace, you set aside the one that you put there, and you set aside any other die you want. All right, so maybe I would like to get another green die, and that's going to open up this blue sponsorship symbol. So I've got that market face sponsorship icon permanently. So once you've done with that, you roll any of these and place them in supply, and you could also re-roll any of the dice that were already in your supply. So if you've got low numbers here, which I do, and maybe you want high numbers for the big furnaces, you can roll those. So let's say maybe I'm going to keep one because I want one for a small furnace and I want other big ones. So I take all these and I re-roll them. Okay, and I did. I got some bigger numbers that I could potentially use for these furnaces here. Maybe I want to do something like this, where I could go here, load these up. Now I've got 12, which would allow me to get a large blue or yellow, and I would take no corruption. All right, let's take a look at the staff board here. As always, the rightmost action you can trigger would be removing a corruption card. That's the same for every character. Let's look at the ones that are specific to this character, the Blacksmith. Sorry. All right. So the leftmost one is called a billower, and what you can do here is you can adjust one or more coal die up or down by a total of 3 pips. Let me get that on camera. And you can distribute that however you want. All right. Next is the metallurgist. You can completely load the empty spaces in one furnace with an alloy die or dice from your supply. Here you can take a forge action in up to 2 loaded furnaces. All right. So that is essentially how this character plays out. You're trying to manipulate the dice in such a way, potentially try to load up multiple furnaces so that with a single forge action, you can get a number of different goods that would be ready to go. That would be the most efficient way to do it if you can make that happen. All right, let's head back over and I'll tell you what I think about it. Okay, so there was the Blacksmith, the character that I feel is the most straightforward of any of the characters within Merchant's Cove. This is a character that I'm going to be giving a complexity level of 1, and I want to make it clear that this is within the range of characters within the game. So 1 being the least complex, 5 being the most complex, only in comparison to other characters within the game. The game as itself is not a terribly heavy game. But this, again, is a relatively straightforward character. It uses a dice placement mechanism. And as you saw in the overview, what you're really trying to do is manipulate those furnaces so that you can get the high heat in the furnaces that give you the large goods, low heat in the furnaces that give you the smaller goods. Very straightforward. Anybody who has played a dice placement, dice manipulation game is going to feel pretty comfortable with this. If I was teaching this game to somebody that maybe was a little bit intimidated by the asymmetric nature of the game, I would probably start them off with the Blacksmith character because, again, it's very straightforward. Probably the most complicated aspect is figuring out how to gain those extra alloy dice from the smelting furnace. That's not the most intuitive mechanic in the world, but it's not terribly complicated overall. So this would be the character I would probably start with the people that are maybe a little, again, intimidated with asymmetric games. So just as a wrap up, the Blacksmith, I'm giving a complexity of 1 using dice placement, and it's a good character to use if you're trying to introduce this to somebody that maybe looks a little bit intimidated when it's all laid out there on the table. All right, well, that's today's character, the Blacksmith. Keep it tuned, and I'm going to be covering all of the characters within Merchant's Cove, and I'm also going to be ranking all of them in order of my preference. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from Dice Tower Headquarters.